Yo, how's it going everybody? You got Sketch here and welcome back to the channel. On this episode, we're going to be taking a trip back to the Xbox 360 and playing some great games and some downright awful ones. I know on this channel I tend to give a lot of games north of 7s and 8s, but when I run across something that's absolute buns, believe me, I'll let it be known. Looking back at the review of Borderlands 3 that I somehow gave an 8 out of 10 at the time, it made me realize that tastes change and degrees of quality can vary several degrees for numerous reasons. In reality, that should have been a 5 or 6 out of 10, but at the time, got a pass. These coming games, however, even make that look like a masterpiece, even when we all know it clearly was not it. Today we're looking at Battleship, the movie, the game, developed by Double Helix Games and published by Activision, releasing alongside the film in 2012 on the Xbox 360, PS3, and Nintendo Wii. If you had told me that the soon-to-be developers of the Killer Instinct reboot would make a movie tie-in for Battleship, I wouldn't have believed you. But over a decade later, finally seeing it for myself and clearing it a few times, let's talk about this one as there is a fair amount to unpack. You play as Cole Mathis, a soldier on the Hawaiian Islands who has a talent for defusing bombs and plays smack in the middle of an alien invasion. The enemies are coming from air, land, and sea, and it's your job to stop them with the use of terrestrial and extraterrestrial weapons alongside your fleet of battleships. You're up against an army, and the battle will be fierce. Are you ready to sink some Battleship? Gameplay wise, you've got a first-person shooter where you'll move through 7 missions along the Hawaiian Isle and blast as many aliens as you can to move to the next location. For context, if you look at what released around Battleship's movie tie-in, it would have had to been the hottest thing smoking to compare. 2012 saw the release of Borderlands 2, Black Ops 2, and Far Cry 3, which were all heavies of the era. But even the month it released, it put it up against Akai Katana and Max Payne 3, which are drastically different and superior games. Missions are linear, often require you just to follow the objective marker and defuse, plant, or defend objectives along the map while keeping your squad alive. Along with the first-person sections, you'll also navigate battleships to engage enemy crafts on the water. These sequences will use the bumpers and triggers to spam your arsenal at the alien crafts with a time limit for each encounter. While you're in first-person combat, several icons will drop from enemies that give your ship wildcards that buff weapons, defense, and health. Kitting out your fleet makes them nearly unstoppable. Through the 7 missions, you'll have access to a handful of weapons like the carbine rifle and the alien craw rifle, which gets more accurate the longer it's fired. The shotgun is very powerful and can plow through the intergalactic ops with reckless aggression. The sniper rifle and handgun round out a standard assortment of weapons, and grenades you can stack to clear crowds. Now the aliens have 3 main types you'll face on the ground, being their infantry soldiers, snipers, and brutes. Infantry is the bulk of what you'll see, and the 2 other types may be a dozen or so through the entire game. Your health regenerates through taking cover if you're getting peppered up, and the aliens can wipe you out kinda fast if you're just rushing into the fray like a madman. During a few encounters, rolling mines will enter the chat, and these will drain your health quickly if they explode next to you. Now that I'm thinking about it, these all kind of feel and sound like COD kill streaks from Temu, but they can all work well enough in burning your biscuits. There are no health pickups or buffs through the whole game, and getting smoked will set you back to the last checkpoint, which are overall generous with the placement. You can use battleships to strike land with missile and EMP barrages that can clear paths, and these also feel like COD kill streaks since you direct them from your notepad, and these are effective and only available a few times through the campaign. To be honest, levels go by fairly quickly since you only have a handful of objectives, and if you're decent with FPS games, this might sound easy, but the controls can work against you here. The combat is where this also shows some signs of wear, but is functional for the most part. Trying to aim in Battleship during the first-person encounters is very strange, to put it simply. It's easier to left trigger right trigger enemies since the auto aim is so aggressive. Trying to free aim during heated gunfights will often get you clapped since it moves very slowly and then very quickly. The aim acceleration goes from crawls to sprints in milliseconds, making slow precision difficult. Even at a distance, it was easier to use auto aim than trying to manually scope in, as it takes so much longer. The sniper rifle was the most egregious offender with its controls, since there are sections where sniping is the best combat option. Trying to hard scope enemies takes longer since you're wrestling with the controls compared to just quick or no scoping. The final mission is where the control gets hectic as there is a waiting period between opening your pad and moving ships into position. While this part takes time on its own, having to wipe numerous waves of enemies on land will have you moving back and forth to grab more wildcards to make sure your ships are moving into position without getting sunk in the process. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, if at any point you lose the USS Missouri, the mission is a failure. The final boss has an overshield that has to be depleted before you can attack, and if your ships aren't in range to attack, the shields will recharge and reset the process. The position on the map will also move around during the encounter, which in itself goes against the rules of Battleship. You can't move your pieces once the game starts, you coward. I kinda wish there was more to say about the gameplay, but that's really it. Besides collecting pegs from the board that grant an achievement, these are otherwise totally necessary to the game. Besides switching between the boots on the ground and ships in the water perspective, that is the gameplay loop you can expect for about 2 to 3 hours to complete here. Graphics wise, Battleship is running on the Hex engine and Havoc physics engine, and at a glance you wouldn't think it's doing much. This is running on the same engine that games like Call of Duty, Destiny 2, Half-Life 2, and Helldivers 2 would run on also. While these are all significantly better uses of the Havoc engine, the difference is mainly how the game functions with its boots on the ground segments. Besides getting to the mission's extraction point, the naval combat is the other main thing you'll be doing, which requires picking up wildcard icons during the game. These can and will block your view at times, giving enemies cover to mob you in heavy formation. The final stage demonstrates this by conveniently covering up incoming enemies as they pack you up with numerous rounds. The icons will stay on the board blocking your vision if you have too many in your inventory, so using those cards as you go is the move to avoiding that issue. The overall animation of sprites isn't bad, but you can pick out spots where it's copy and pasted from Call of Duty, like the reload animations. Some of them are genuinely cool looking, like the crawl and sniper rifle animations, but others you can tell are borrowed from something else. At points, attention to detail like the shattering armor and neon blue splatter of alien hemoglobin is pretty dope. It's got those points where it's trying, but also has those points where it's phoned in, and they're pretty obvious. The environments for the most part aren't that bad, with some of the alien architecture being well detailed, almost Stargate style designs. You get some locales of the Hawaiian coast at different times of day, but overall this doesn't go much beyond the beaches, cliff sides, and barren interiors. The levels don't vary much, even though it doesn't look the worst. It stays consistently meh with its visuals, especially for 2012. The alien designs are bog standard models that you'll only see 3 variants of through the entire game. The grunts with crawl rifles will be the enemies seen most, along with about a dozen or so chargers and snipers. The rippers are seen as mines and aerial deployed alien defenses, and even the alien ship models are fairly similar, besides the mothership, which is a slightly larger version of the ships that you've already been seeing. Explosions and damage animations look decent, but again, aren't the best. You have to remember when this released, it was a full price game like all the AAA games that released around it, with noticeably less effort put into it. For a time when the first person shooter was a popular genre, the ones that blatantly copied others were often met with mixed results. It all kind of circles back to there not being any variety from its gameplay to how it looks. While most of it is not the worst, it just never really gets above being whatever in numerous areas. There are cutscenes between each stage similar to the early Call of Duty games, and this is where the frame rate noticeably dips. Whenever cutscenes play, the frame rate always hits rough snags during the video, which is something that even past generation games were able to do smoothly. To see how much it tanks there and during gameplay segments, it's interesting that an FPS game released in 2012 was this harsh, considering the engine and hardware could handle much more. There are points where it looks okay, but more often than not, the frames just weren't steady during the campaign. I almost forgot that during the end credits, it crashed when the game skid prompt came up, so even clearing it doesn't have much payoff here. Sound-wise, Battleship is pretty standard with its sound effects and soundtrack composed by the duo of Kevin Cohen and Michael Nielsen. You'll get a lot of dramatic strings and orchestral tunes throughout the game's short run, and it doesn't sound bad, honestly. While it may not be anything out of the ordinary, it does have the template for action set pieces during frantic gun and naval battles. It reminds me a lot of movie trailers and summer blockbuster films, especially from the 90s and early 2000s. Sound effects are decent when it comes to gun audio overall. The shotgun in particular straight up booms with every shot, and the other weapons don't sound half bad either. The sniper rifle has a dope charge up sound, and when the battle takes it to the seas, the barrage of cannons and turrets does sound decent, but again, not necessarily pushing any boundaries. The radio chatter is decent with its realistic static, and the voice line delivery is balanced even if the script isn't groundbreaking. None of the cast of the film is involved with the game, but the voice talent gets the job done considering this isn't a deep plot. You'll interact with other soldiers on the island at times, but you're still getting dialogue to move the stage along, and not much more. The overall consistency of things being passable seem to be the claim to fame across the board, where even the audio has its moments, the bar never really raises from the baseline. To sum it all up, Battleship is something you can put in a console and play if you want to, but outside of achievements and the curiosity of what movie tie-in games from the 2010s were like, there's not much on offer here. This being published by Activision makes the connection of why it feels so similar to Call of Duty, but if you want to play a game that feels like Call of Duty, play the real thing, since it's a far better experience, especially during that era. Movie tie-in games were common for a long time, and there are some good ones and bad ones. This, however, is a 2-pack of ass. Objectively, it's not the worst FPS game I've ever played, but it's not a good one either, as it sails the high seas of mediocrity. The craziest part is that this was a full price release that can literally be cleared in a few hours, like 4 if you're going for 100% runs, but often south of 3 hours. The gameplay shift from the ground to the sea doesn't exactly flow the best, but considering the premise this, I guess it makes sense. Overall, it functions, but it's buns, and for how bare bones it is, I can see why people were bummed when this came out in 2012 if they bought this, since there were so many better options instead of this. Battleship the game gets a 3 out of 10 and is not recommended unless you really just want to play a Diet Call of Duty hybrid. While this has had some good ideas, it just doesn't form into a good game since everything is so repetitive and uninspired. I was genuinely curious about this one and can now confirm it is just as cheeks as I heard it would be. There are surprisingly worse FPS games on the 360 than this one, and we'll be taking a look at one soon that honestly is hilarious in how bad it was. This can be found for around $10 or so if you're curious to find a copy, but I would suggest putting that towards something much better than this. And if you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching, and if you find these videos helpful, that's awesome, glad to use it as a resource. Check back often, we'll have more reviews and commentaries come up in the near future, but until then, take it easy and stay safe out there. I'll see you on the next one.